when the sequel trilogy came out, there was even a romantic love story book about two characters. I forget the names. It was called Star Wars Lost Stars, I believe. It's like a young adult novel, and it was like a full blown romance. It was like a Twilight ish thing, right? That kind of theme, where it's like one guy goes off to join the rebels. The girl, she becomes like this like top notch like Star Destroyer commander or something like
The hell are you reading?
that.
All right, what's good, everyone? Ninja To Viaduct back at it again. I'm Andrew. Joining me tonight, we have Chris and Raymond. Now, for last week's episode, we promised you guys that we would try to get away from games in our convos, and then we proceeded to just talk about games throughout the whole episode. But by George, we are going to try to do something different, and we're going to spread our wings. So tonight, we're going to just jump right into it, and maybe we'll talk about games at some point. But for tonight's topic, we're talking Star Wars. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and we're just going to kind of see how the conversation flows. But to kick everything off, I'll throw it to Chris. So, Chris, what's your current stance on sort of this contentious space fantasy?
Yeah, no. So for me, now I definitely like Star Wars. I mean, I've grouped Star Wars, watched Star Wars since very young, like many others out there. And as it is right now, I understand a lot of the criticisms that are out there about Star Wars. But in general, for me, I really do enjoy where Star Wars is right now. My general take is that I appreciate the fact that we have more Star Wars in the amount of frequency and cadence compared to what was before, right? Like we had like the original trilogy, and there was a few years, then we had the prequel trilogy, and then a few years of that, then we had the latest sequel trilogies, and now we're getting lots of different Star Wars um, media out there, whether it's games, comics, books, the movies, the TV shows, and there's to me there's a lot of variety, which I appreciate. Some that I understand the critiques out there when I watched it, and I can see it. And for me, I definitely consider myself more of a above, maybe not so hardcore, but definitely much more than a casual viewer of Star Wars. Like you ask me a question about Star Wars, I definitely would generally know it. I might not go know as well like very deep details, like some really hardcore fans are out there. But definitely know my main characters, know the general story. For the most part, I've followed all the TV shows, all the films. I definitely have been following recently the High Republic books and comics. A lot of audiobooks I've been listening to for those, some of the other novels that are canon. And for me, for my perspective, I definitely think that Star Wars is in a place to provide me good entertainment that I like, and I definitely do enjoy it. Do I see where things could be better? Definitely, and we definitely can talk more about like some of the more contentious things out there about Star Wars that we see out there, even from TV shows, the films, the comic books, and so forth. But where I stand right now is for Star Wars. I like it. Anything new about Star Wars, I'm always wanting to get more of. Every time they announce something about Star Wars, I want more of. I mean, even if it's like a Disneyland park theme, or some sort of new ride they announce, which I'm looking forward to. Any more new stuff that they push out, I'm definitely on board for that. So, Star Wars for me, I like it. I'm happy about it. Definitely can understand the criticisms, but they don't bother me that much. Probably the the harshest criticism, which I can relate to and understand the critiques, is the Acolyte TV series, which for me was a bit hard to take in, given because I really do like the High Republic series. I mean, the books, the comics, I'm really into that. I really like what they're doing with the story, kind of fleshing out years before the Skywalker era, and being able to flesh out like kind of like a different type of Jedi, a different type of galaxy, different kind of republic. There was no Empire. Jedi are in their prime. They look different. The lightsabers look different. Their demeanor is different. The types of engagements and problems they have is really great. And the books and the comics all tie together. So I really like what the High Republic has to offer when it first came out as a set of, written media and audiobooks, which is why when the High Republic recently, which is why when the Acolyte came out, and I was really looking forward to it when they first announced that it was be based in the High Republic area, and just before leading up into the Skywalker era, I was really looking forward to it, and which is why I was a bit mixed feelings about watching that when it finally came out, and I watched all the episodes. In that it promised us a way to see into give us a visual of the High Republic, a glimpse of it. But the execution, even for me, I have to admit, for a viewer like me, I have to admit, could tell there was something a bit janky with the acolytes filmmaking in that regards. So it's which kind of gets me to what I do generally feel about Star Wars, in that the world is great. Being able to make more Star Wars is great to me, but there is a bit of an inconsistency with how Star Wars is being made, um, and that's something that it should be worked on a bit more, given the fact that after the Acolyte came out, they pretty much axed the any futures for the Acolyte. Not necessarily any more series that take place within the High Republic era. I hope not. I really do hope that they do additional live action projects that delve into the High Republic era. But any continuation of the Acolyte was pretty much axed. And when you look at the numbers, when you read the news about it, you can't blame them. I mean, how much there was like tons of money, millions of dollars that were put into Acolyte, and one, the viewership wasn't great, and two, the honestly, even I had to admit, watching Acolyte did seem not as high quality as compared to what you would normally imagine a Star Wars production would look like, right? I mean, everything looks clean cut. The editing looks great, like Star Wars esque, and yet the Acolyte was very, very not as clean cut as you expect from a Star Wars project. So, for me right now, that's kind of where I stand with Star Wars in recent news about that. But I that's just me. I mean, I'm not sure where y'all all stand. I mean, what do you think, Andrew? How about what's your take on it so far? I know you are really good critiquer and a lot of really good things about Star Wars. So, what's going in your mind about that?
So for me in Star Wars, I I start off by I'll start off by saying that Star Wars I think is like one of the coolest IPs out there for me personally. Like
I agree. Yeah.
I do really want just like more from that world, and to be able to explore just like it doesn't even need to be like a huge galactic story, but I just think that the world is so fascinating, the characters, the creatures, and just like everyday life is so fascinating in the world of Star Wars that I want to see that.
Mhm.
And yet for like everything that has come out in the past like 10 years or so roughly, um well, not everything, there are a few shining lights, but a lot of it has been very disappointing for me. Like
Mm.
I'm like I wouldn't say I'm like a huge hardcore fan, although I probably am a bigger fan compared to you both. But it it just feels like there's not a clear direction as to where they're taking Star Wars, and we're getting some of that in small bits and pieces, like with things like um, Ahsoka, right? There's Dave Filoni's a part of that. He was a part of the Clone Wars series, like cartoon series, and so there is like a consistent through line there. And while I may not necessarily agree with that particular through line, like I can at least respect that it's like a consistent vision across the board. Uh, while compared to like a lot of the other products out there, it's just chaos. And so like the most recent example is something like the Acolyte, right? And I probably had the biggest hopes for this series, being somewhat removed from um, the Galactic Republic era, Empire era, which I feel like is way overdone and has been overdone for quite some time. So it was exciting to get a different perspective on things. But like you said, the execution just was not great. I thought, like, on a technical level, the cinematography, the prop work, costuming, it all looked great, but just the writing was really bad in that show, and like shockingly bad. And even the way the actors were performing, and I don't even blame the actors per se, because I've seen these actors in other things and they're great. And so someone from the producer side or the director saw this and said, yes, this is the take we're going to get. And that's just supremely disappointing. And with where they're going with that story, a lot of cool elements, but once again, just the execution was truly awful. And I also think they had a lot of other interesting ideas that they sort of set up or possibly tease, and then they went a different direction, which I feel wasn't the right direction either. Like, I think they totally could have changed that story to still encapsulate what they originally wanted to achieve, which was the story around the twin sisters, um, but could have gone about it in a totally different way. And also just this decision to like kill off really great and interesting characters as well. It just, there's a lot of puzzling decisions with where they're taking the series, and we're focusing on the television shows, but there are other elements to Star Wars with comic books, with novels, and with games. And for the most part, seemingly those are doing pretty well. I kind of fell off of a lot of that stuff once Disney acquired them, just because I was so attached to what's considered like Legends content now. Um, and so it just seemed like a lot of work to sort of like relearn everything for like the same time frame. So I didn't really want to get into the new content, but from what I've seen, it looks like it's doing pretty well there. But yeah, just with the films and the shows, that has just been like miss after miss, which also with that, I mean, when Force Awakens first came out too, like I felt that was such a high as well. And where things went afterwards with like Last Jedi, that was the first domino to just this constant disappointment train.
Mm, mm.
But I've been rambling quite a bit. A lot of negativity here. There are some good things, I promise, but yeah, it's my relationship with Star Wars is almost like, I like to say it's sort of like a toxic relationship where it's like I know it's bad and I should leave it at this point, but I see like glimpses of goodness there, and I'm like, but maybe they can change, only to be disappointed again and again. um,
Like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Because for me, I mean, Mandalorian was pretty cool. I mean, I always thought Boba Fett was cool, but
Mm.
now he has his own little series. Because I thought he was cooler, like being like that, kind of mysterious character in the background.
mhm.
But now, I don't know. They make a
Now they
show
fleshed
about
out
him.
his, yeah, Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
I think I think it's fair to for sure to say that they're trying to make it a kind of Marvel esque, MCU s type of thing going on. That we're trying to move towards it. I mean, they're making another film with Ray supposedly coming up. I mean, they have the Mandalorian, had Ahsoka TV series, and the characters from like Star Wars Rebels. I guess the plan is to kind of converge into, I think, what is it called, Andrew? The Mandalorian and Grogu, something like that film that's coming down the line.
Mhm.
And some of the, I guess, from what I've seen, like from the books and novels that I pay attention to, they are tying into, you see characters that are referenced, do show up in the TV shows in some way or form. Um, so I think they are trying to like make it kind of like a MCU as kind of like roadmap for that. I would say though, um, there is probably to me a bit of a disadvantage for the people in Star Wars making it versus the people at Marvel. When that with Marvel, there's a lot of like pre-existing material to work off from, right? I mean, yeah, they can use Marvel, they can use as a reference, but there's kind of like a guiding light, and they could change some aspects of the comic storylines, I'm sure, which they have done, changing characters a little bit or changing kind of the timeline or how things go towards. But there's like a guiding reference, right? Kind of like Game of Thrones, where you had the books until there wasn't no more books to reference. So I think Star Wars is, like you said, maybe trying to be MCU-esque, but without that guiding light, which to me kind of gets to what Andrew was saying a little bit earlier, saying that how it seems to be inconsistent with its planning, and which, yeah, I have to admit, I think the inconsistency was definitely evident in the sequel trilogy. We had the Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and the Rise of Skywalker. That those last three films were not did not seem to have a a strong concrete plan as to how each movie was supposed to progress. I mean, yeah, they tried to tie it together, but definitely, arguably, was not consistent in the best way possible. And I think how the sequel trilogy ended, um, showed that inconsistency. Um, but they are um, making it, I agree, to like an MCU kind of Marvel style type of world. And I hope they fleshed out to be good stuff. Although I'm not too sure, uh, really how it will pan out. I'm hopeful, but yeah, I mean, it's it's hard to see what they can plan when they don't really when they're making things go along the way, right? So, and it kind of could get back to what Andrew's thinking too about, not necessarily agreeing with how the how they're taking things forward. So, yeah, I mean, what's your take on that, Andrew?
I don't I don't mind it being more MCU like, but for it to be MCU like, and just to provide some structure, this, let's say MCU for the Infinity Saga, right? Because that was like peak MCU, and so I don't mind them trying to emulate that. I just think they're doing a really bad job of doing it. Because like it, for as vast as this galaxy is set up to be, everybody keeps running into everybody, just like on a pretty daily basis. And it just seems so small world. And in terms of building out stories and characters, everybody's story is all deeply tied to one another, right? Where while you have like the MCU, let's talk back to like phase one. Everyone, for the most part, the guiding light was just that they were in the same universe together, and Earth is involved in some shape or another. But for the most part, there was zero overlap, except this one thread that was placed in the very first Iron Man movie, right, with Nick Fury, and there's the Avenger Initiative, and so that's just a tease of like what could come. But seemingly, to your average viewer, these characters were in no way related to one another, right? Until they were, and that's where you kind of have like these hype moments. While I think in Star Wars, everybody is so intrinsically tied to one another and you have to know what's going on in plot A to go to know what's happening in plot B, right? And there's no like aha moment that you get the same way that you get in like the MCU when it finally does converge. It's just more of like a yeah, you always have to kind of be on top of things. But it's just it's not exciting in that way. It's I would even argue to say like it's a little boring.
My other question is, with the original trilogy and the prequels, like, can they create new characters or stories to replace that? Like, will there be a new timeline that will be as exciting as, like, what would you call it, the Anakin Luke arc?
Mm.
Mm.
Like, do you see
I
that
think
in the future? Because
I personally think so. I personally think it's
like,
possible, and I personally would like to move away from Skywalker. As much as we all like Luke Skywalker, iconic, right? Han Solo, Leia, and even Ray. I mean, even Ray. Yeah, I don't like the fact that how she became a Skywalker at the end. But even Ray as a character, I mean, she was pretty good, pretty interesting. But I think the problem is that right now, for like business purposes, for Disney corporate, it's like a surefire thing, right? If you stay within the Skywalker or somehow tied to Skywalker in some way, it's hopefully gonna make money, right? But if you were to take it away from that era, I think it's very possible. Um, it's just execution, and I say it's possible because the High Republic stuff, right? The High Republic story, the novels, tons of different characters and tons of comics that with like different types of arcs that kind of have like an Infinity War, Infinity Saga type S, where there's like a in the center like a common um, common story that slowly ties into each new novel comic as it goes forward. But otherwise, they are like self-contained, right, for the most part. But you eventually get to the end. But when you look at the High Republic, I mean, to me, from what I've read and seen and listened to, it's really fleshed out. It's really interesting. It's also really pretty ruthless and like how it handles the characters. Like a lot of people die in that series. It's like people who you want to live don't make it out. People who you do want to not make it, keep on going. And it, it it's kind of like Game of Thrones is where at this point for me, we're at the I think the last part of this High Republic um, novel series where you really don't know who is gonna make it out. You really don't. And so it's very interesting, and each character is really fleshed out pretty well. Maybe that's also because of the medium, because it's books and comics, right? They have a lot more time, a lot more words to play with, kind of flesh out different characters. And there are some pretty iconic characters to me in the High Republic, right? They are pretty good that I could see if they came onto the live action screen, whether it's a TV show or a movie, they would be pretty good. But it just gets back to what Andrew said, where it's the execution. Because for the Acolyte, I was really looking forward to see the High Republic being visually there. It'd be so great to see how the novels look like on the big screen, but the execution wasn't there. Um, and I have a feeling I haven't seen the numbers, but I do have a feeling that maybe the people who read and pay attention to High Republic is more in the unfortunate niche group, especially given the viewership for the Acolyte. I mean, the Acolyte had a lot of good stuff going, but like Andrew said, the execution wasn't so great. But even take that out, the viewership for Acolyte, there was viewership, but definitely was not putting in numbers like the Mandalorian, for whatever reason that may be, right? And so to answer your question, Raymond, is it possible? I really do think it's possible. It might, to me, it takes marketing, you know, um, and it takes better execution and definitely better word of mouth um, for whenever the the right product comes out. And for the long term success of Star Wars, I believe for long term longevity, without it becoming, to becoming ever boring at some point, um, I think they do have to. I think it would be healthy for Star Wars as a whole to somehow pivot into different eras. It could be either the High Republic, it can be even further back, maybe, whether it's like the I forgot. You might know, Andrew. I forgot, but next Old Republic time era, right? That going that far back into the series. It just comes down to execution, proper marketing, and yeah, and then possible, but just gotta make sure you do it right, in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they could do it. It's just that they constantly fail to do so. Like just take like the prequels trilogy, right? When we were first introduced to it, like there are a lot of flaws with that series, and just let's dial into just the Phantom Menace. A lot of flaws with that movie itself too. But they introduced a lot of characters in there that, for the most part, we still love today, right? Like Jin, Mace Windu, Yaddle. Like these are really interesting characters that only got like little bit of screen time, and you know what? That's fine. I think, right? It adds some mystery to them, adds some mystique, and I think they structured it well enough to like you just need to know this little bit about them. They're like master or they're Obi-Wan's um, instructor at the time, and that's it, right? But I think there's this weird desire in this current age of Star Wars to over explain everything and to answer every mystery out there. But, you know, what was, I think, was really fascinating about like the original trilogy was that we didn't have a lot of answers, right? There was a lot of mystery to what the hell was going on in that world, right? There was an empire, there's a dude in a robotic suit that has a red sword, and like what the heck is the force? It is it telekinetic powers? Is it a religion? We didn't have all these answers, and that got fans just to kind of think and percolate about it. And I think that's something that we're missing today is just a lot of the like mystery elements to just get the fandom hyped up about it. And I do think that's where Ahsoka, the Ahsoka series, is pretty intriguing. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan per se about the direction that it's heading into, but I do think it's a vision that Dave Filoni has been consistent with, and so that's fine, right? But there is a lot of intrigue there, where he's sort of dabbling into the more mystic elements of Star Wars, right? Which is fine, but there's a lot of intrigue there, and so I do actually enjoy that show for what it is as well. But you know, moving away from the prequel trilogy, even with the sequel trilogy and the Force Awakens, like the first half hour, we really don't get like a solid touchstone to characters we know, right? We get the introduction to Poe, to Kylo, to Finn, to Rey, right? These are all just like randos. But I came to really love those characters and love that entire movie. And then Last Jedi rolls around and they answered a bunch of different questions that we really didn't need the answers to, or the answers were done.
Yeah.
Could they do it? Yes.
Wait, The Last Jedi is when Leia flew, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Leia Poppins.
I was done after that. With her flying back, and then whatever that freaking romance story they had with the Finn and that whatever that girl.
Mm.
Rose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I checked out because even like emo Ren, you know, like
Mm.
like previously we had Darth Vader, and now it's this guy. Like I don't know, he was just like a whiny, like teenager. Like he looked like he was always about to cry. Like I never felt intimidated by him.
That's
But
fair. That's a fair
Rogue
statement.
One was good.
Mm.
Yeah, Rogue One. I also feel is just they totally nailed it. Like I would argue to say that that is like my favorite movie
Yeah,
for the Star Wars series.
that was a good one.
Yeah, Rogue One and Andor. So I think and Andor is pretty good. I think Rogue One and Andor is a fine example of when Star Wars is successful in not focusing on the Jedi and like the core characters. I mean, because like you all been saying, right? There's Star Wars has such a it's a wide galactic space, right? Of different systems, different peoples, different politics, people who are not with the Republic, and so forth. So you have a lot of stuff, possibilities, and that are equally as interesting as the Jedi, equally as interesting as the Republic or the Rebellion or the Rebels, or whichever era you're in. And so we have Rogue One, like you said. Yeah, I agree. Rogue One is really great. I mean, other than was it when was there a lightsaber? It was at the very end, right? When Darth Vader came up, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Andor, I mean, was there a lightsaber? I really don't think so. I can't recall. Was there a lightsaber? No, I there was just regular people, gradually rebelling, and it was a smartly made show. I mean, it had a lot of Blade Runner esque in the first episode. That was really cool. The dialogue was great. Oh, dialogue was really awesome. And and it was a show that really showed a mature side. It was still me considered PG-13. It wasn't hitting the R level type of material, but it was getting pretty dark and mature for what it was showing. Like I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable showing Andor to a elementary age child. Just keep their minds a little innocent for until later. But that was really good stuff. So yeah, Rogue One, Andor is example of what it could be if they just put the effort to follow and build up a side of characters that are beyond just the core characters that we know of for sure. And I don't know what any new project is gonna do that. I mean, the Andor season 2 is coming, but that's Andor season 2 is supposed to end after season 2, and it's supposed to lead up into Rogue One, right? So I would be interested to see something like the rumored or the supposedly on or off um, Rogue Squadron film, or kind of like the film that they're planning to focus on, like the pilots, right? I think that would be very interesting. I honestly think it would be very interesting if they made a film that was from the perspective of, like, if they had to stick with the Skywalker era. It would be, to me, very interesting to make either film or a TV show from the perspective of the stormtroopers or the Empire side. I mean, you can live with that from Andor, but it'd be very interesting to kind of see it more closely from that perspective. Um, I mean, I'd even be interested to see more like I mean, this is probably very niche, but maybe more like more of like a dramatization of the politics of the Republic. If they could somehow make it interesting without being too like boring kind of thing, it'd be very interesting, right? Just because to flesh out, that different aspects of the world, and I think there's a market for it. It would keep things interesting, for sure, for for the overall Star Wars series as a whole. But maybe those are two niche things. I'm not sure, but yeah, definitely would be interesting to kind of see how they focus on characters that are not core.
I think their biggest issue right now is that they're kind of pigeonholed within this 40-year time frame of everything from when the prequels happened to the original trilogy and then also the sequel series, right? And it's just like all the things that we've watched, Acolyte aside, has just been so dialed in to this time frame that it just it feels boring, I think. um, and it also just seems strange too. Like if you do keep up with everything, right? There's a lot of mystery about this universe, and they kind of talk about it like throughout their shows, right? Especially when you dial into like the Jedi, where it's like, yes, we have all these archives, and no one can never truly know everything about the universe. And then you just have like a couple of characters who are literally learning everything about the universe, and it's unfolding right before us. And it just it seems so silly, and I think they would be able to address that if they just get away from this time frame. Just remove us even like 30 years further into the future, get away from the Star Wars, or like the Skywalkers. Maybe they're there as like legends to be told, right? But we really don't see these people anymore, and that's fine, right? And then you can build off of new characters and what it's like, living in a world where people are telling stories about the legend of Luke Skywalker and Rey and all these folks, right? Or take it backwards and into the High Republic era, into the Old Republic era. Be very separated from these 40 years of Star Wars that we've been getting. And, that's another thing that was also a little bit disappointing with the Acolyte is that where, what, I think it was like
100 years.
I'm getting kind of mixed up. It was either 100 years or like 300 years prior. And
200, yeah.
what do? They immediately anchor it back to the current era by showing Kiadi Mundi and even what's his name, Plagueis, right? And
You said like
I know I'm
couldn't they
being super negative about this, but it's just so disappointing because I know what Star Wars could be.
yeah, like couldn't they do Old Republic stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Like like I'm super casual and I kind of know Old Republic. Like they had the
Mm-hmm.
two great games. I don't know if you guys watch the cinematics
Mm-hmm.
online.
Yeah.
Like those are badass. You know. So like as a casual, like I never heard of High Republic until now. But like I feel
Yeah.
like they could do that or do like a Sith focused film or TV shows. Like I'm kind of tired of seeing the good guys. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what they are trying to do. Like, so yeah, so the High Republic, it's I forgot how yeah, I forgot how far back it was, like maybe 300, 400 years prior to Skywalker era, or maybe a little bit more. Well, actually, no, I take it back. High Republic actually goes even further back. All right, so like the core High Republic story takes back to about like 300 years prior to Skywalker era, and then there's an aspect of the story that goes even back further back to flesh out certain aspects of the story that connects with the current telling of the High Republic story, right? So it's kind of like so they kind of do like here's the current situation in the High Republic, and then part two, phase two is kind of like a prequel that that seems unrelated, but then towards the end of that phase, part two, it ties into phase one, and then phase three continues off where phase one ended. And yeah, the High Republic is definitely to me an example of what, like you say, Raymond. Yeah, they could delve more into like the old Republic era, and they have the material for it. And I would argue there's a tons of people, tons of authors, storytellers that have a passion for Star Wars and do want to tell a story that's not necessarily Skywalker. Like I'm sure there's tons of ideas that's floating in other people's minds about the stories they want to tell, the conflicts that could be out there. Right, the beginning of the Sith, right, the um, um, beginning of like some other enemy arc in the Old Republic or High Republic era, or even some other time era where it may be. But it just comes down to the execution. I think the books, the comics, High Republic example is great. Like you said, Raymond, the games are pretty good, right? I mean, the games, the Old Republic is still going. Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, they're relatively older games, but they were quite good games. We still have a following today, and the story is still relevant.
Mhm.
And a lot of people still want to see a Old Republic or Knights of the Old Republic era type of live action. I'm very sure about that, and they have people that I believe can create a great story with great characters and be appealing to the mass, not just for people who are just casual fans or maybe above casual fans or maybe um, very niche for hardcore fans. I think they do have material out there to make that era of Star Wars very appealing to the mass market. It just comes to execution, right? And being smart with their budget. I mean, at the end of the day, all this is a business, right? And I think that's one of the major downfalls for Acolyte. If Acolyte, even if it wasn't really executed properly, it still had a lot going for it, which it could have maybe season two improved upon. But when you read the news about the amount of money that poured into that and the amount of return, from a corporate standpoint, investment wise, it's understandable why they cut it. It's just super unfortunate because Acolyte could have been a platform, a template for how to bring live action Star Wars storytelling into a different era. And yeah, it would be great. It would be great to see other stuff. And yeah, it can. I do agree. It is getting a bit boring to see to stay within the Skywalker era. Like at this point, there's a lot of details about the rebellion, um, the Rebel Alliance, and so forth, and how different people contributed to the eventual downfall of the Empire and the New Republic came to be. And at this point, we already know how the story began. We already know how the story ended. They're really just filling in a lot of these like middle stuff, which technically you argue is good to know, but do we really need to know it? Not really, because we kind of already know how it's gonna end. For the most part. I think at this point, I think they've
Mhm.
definitely made more than enough story content to flesh out. And if they want to continue on telling that story, I wouldn't say the to me, I would appreciate just keeping that towards other mediums like games. All right, games to flesh out that if they wanted to, comics if they want to flesh out more, but for like bigger, high production projects, films, TVs, yeah, I mean, gotta bring it way back or bring it way forward, like Andrew's mentioning, and it would definitely keep things fresh. So, fingers crossed. But to me, right now, I'm a bit doubtful after how Acolyte performed financially for Disney. All right, because at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is money, right? So at this, well, yeah,
I'm curious as how. I mean, like as far as I know, in terms of movies, all right. So you have like the Mandalorian and Grogu, and then the Ray project. Like I feel like that those are the only things that are like really confirmed. Like we've heard a bunch of different announcements, like the Taika Waititi project that's supposed to happen. Technically, Ryan Johnson's films haven't been like, canceled yet. There's a bunch of different movies out there, but we really haven't heard any new updates on them, except for Mandalorian, Grogu, and Ray. And even then, I feel like they're just too close that we would get very much of the same thing. Now, I do think it would be interesting with, especially with Ray's movie, what they're building in Ahsoka. I feel like that would be a good payoff, to have it all introduced in Ahsoka, plant those seeds, but the real threat, um, Ray now has to deal with that. Which did you watch Ahsoka, Chris or Raymond?
I watched it.
Okay, okay. So Raymond, essentially what they're alluding to is like gods of this universe and like with the Force, and so in canon, you have the introduction to like three of the four gods, and they're like all family members. Um, but in Legends, they've introduced this character called like the Mother, who essentially is like an eldritch type creature, that's just like immortal and all consuming. and you can't really kill this thing. You can just simply imprison it, and you have to deal with it in like X amount of years. And so we're finally getting like a little bit of a tease of that. But I do think that that would make the next logical sense to where they take the series now and have Ray deal with it, right? Especially with how they ended the sequel trilogy, as like right, didn't like it then, but she's the Jedi, right? All powerful, all the powers of all Jedi before her are in her now, right? And she has like supreme abilities that she can like hold a ship in place, like a huge galactic ship in place, trying to light speed away. And so I feel like for like power scaling purposes, it makes sense to have her go up against a god like creature.
I personally never thought about that, but I mean, it is interesting to see, given like like you said, how they made Ray to be all powerful at the end of the Rise of Skywalker. So hearing that take from you, Andrew, yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes. I'm hopeful with the new film they're making with Daisy Ridley's Ray, that it'll hopefully be like a restart after the sequel trilogy, and they do it right, because they don't have the core characters to introduce again, right? I mean Luke is gone, Han is gone, Leia is gone, right? I mean Kylo Ren is gone too, and he had his problems. Definitely a character that could have been been done better. But hopefully with this new film coming up, and as they're slowly moving towards the future, it will be like a clean start. It is interesting to see how they would make Star Wars have a story going up against like a god, quote unquote. Because to me, I guess if you did that right, then like what's after that? I mean, how do you beat a god, right? How do you tell a story after God? So I'm kind of curious to see how that will pan out. Um, but
Two gods.
it yeah, right, yeah, that's true. Right. So it's I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting. Um, I think I'm intrigued by that story. Is that story? I'd be kind of curious to see how that goes. Um, but for me personally, I would definitely like to see more stories about like other like not necessarily super grand scale problems, but definitely more, I guess, down to earth, so to speak. Um, uh, Conflicts, um, that would be definitely more appealing to me, I think. And hopefully they do. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they do. I don't know. They had, like you said, they haven't been much of a like a MCU esque roadmap. Phase 4, Phase 5, Phase 6, Phase 7, going into the future, right? And with estimated years to look forward to. Um, but fingers hopeful. Hopefully, fingers crossed. The people at Disney are trying to get a grip on things. For one, the franchise's long term sustainability, and two, for us fans, for all fans, and for all not even hardcore fans. I think Star Wars is a iconic cultural thing, culture thing, right? That appeals not just to hardcore fans, even above hardcore fans, above average fans. It's just in general, Star Wars is definitely recognized um, by, I'm sure, nearly everyone. Whether you're a fan of it or not, I mean, everyone's gonna know what lightsabers are. Everyone's gonna know what a stormtrooper is, right? Everyone's gonna know what Star Wars title is. So, I think for long-term longevity, yeah, hopefully they get it right. Well, looking forward to it.
You know, think about the games too. Like I know that we haven't had that many games come out since like post Disney, but the games that have come out seemingly have been doing pretty well, especially in the Fallen Jedi series. And I do think like some of the seeds that were planted there could easily lead up into a new game, or not new game. I mean, yes, a game, but into like a new series or a new movie. And this is like kind of tying back into our conversation about, like, you know, is Star Wars, doing too much to emulate the MCU? And I don't think that that's a bad thing, right? Like, you could have a smaller story where everything is like contained to a singular planet, and it's like some type of internal civil war conflict. Maybe it's in a forest somewhere, and there's legends about, like, the hero of the day who brought peace to the planet. Later, it's revealed it's a Jedi, and our main character, seemingly has force-like abilities, solves the problems, and prevents civil war. And at the end of it, a ship lands, a guy comes out, and he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to start a new order. I want you to be a part of it." And it's Cal Kestis, right? Like that. That's all you need, and that can jumpstart your new, like, Star Wars cinematic universe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there are rumors that they will bring Cal Kestis character into live action in some way. And plus, they have the actor. I mean,
Yeah,
they
and he's
made
good.
Cal look like the actor. Yeah, he's good too. So yeah, I mean, it'd be cool to see him come up too. And I think that's a good thing about Star Wars, with what they're doing today, is that they have all these other medias that introduce characters that we don't know that are not in the film, but you would argue the characters that they make outside the films and the live action are arguably better, right? So it makes me excited to see, or to the possibility to see these non-TV show, non-film characters eventually make their debut into a live action. Because that'd be really cool. Because at that point they're really hyped up, right? Like we know we like them. The creators know we like them, so they'll bring it up, and so that'll be an interesting movement. And so, like I said, yeah, maybe it becomes um, a a bank off point for a new interesting storyline, and and more games, and more, definitely more games. I definitely like the games. Star Wars Outlaws. I haven't played it yet. I know I will play it sometime eventually. I know the reviews about it being kind of a bit of like a, not great but not bad game. But the fact that it's about the Star Wars underworld, and no lightsabers, all that kind of stuff, I am definitely intrigued. So I definitely will see myself playing Star Wars Outlaws at some point. I'm just waiting for the time where they package it into like Star Wars Outlaws, like Gold Edition, and have all the DLC in one package thing. So, but yeah.
I'm just waiting for the next Battlefront.
Mm.
That would be interesting.
Because what was it? Star Wars Outlaw? Like, why would I want to play a thief in space? I mean, it's like it's like the, yeah, like, okay, I'm gonna have my hot take that I mentioned before. Like, without lightsabers, I don't know. I just don't find Star Wars intriguing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough as a
Maybe
game.
as a
No, definitely
casual,
as
how
a game.
they kind of like, if there's no Jedi Sith, I don't know. Just like Battlefront was cool.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think they were trying to go for kind of like a mix, open world with a bit of like an Uncharted kind of feel for Star Wars Outlaws, which I personally would be am into. I mean, I know the reviews say the game is a bit more like not just average, not great, but not bad for a Star Wars game, right? For a Star Wars game, everyone thinks it's supposed to be really great, right? But yeah, definitely Battlefront. Yeah, Battlefront. At this point, it's been a while since the Battlefront 2 came out. Not the original Battlefront 2, but like the current modern Battlefront 2 came out. I like the Battlefront games. I like one. I like what they did with two. Um, I'm looking forward to a third one, should ever that come someday. I have a feeling they're gonna time it to the next big Star Wars film. That's my guess,
With the
right?
movies.
And yeah, that's my guess. They probably just gonna time it with that, because that's what they did with the first Battlefront, right? But they tied it with the Force Awakens kind of closely, and I'm looking forward to it. My wish for the Battlefront 3 is that they don't make it is they make it a little bit more more hardcore. Like you would argue Battlefront 1 and 2, it def it definitely was designed to be more accessible compared to a game like Battlefield, right? I mean Battlefront was made by DICE um, from the start. So, but it definitely did not feel like a typical Battlefield game. It was definitely much more accessible and I guess simplified, which I think is understandable, but can but takes away from what Star Wars like really could be. Um, if you were to kind of like not be, and it could be like a whole like hey, let's not break the branding image of Star Wars. You know, we're still a Disney kind of thing. Um, unfortunately, maybe. But if they made Battlefront 3, I definitely would like to see a bit more of a a challenging type of shooter and more a less casual type of game in mechanic. It doesn't I mean in mechanics and what you can do, like maybe more destructibles, maybe more strategic thought. The gameplay is a bit more strategic and how to play that. Um, it'd be very interesting to see that. And yeah, definitely incorporate the Jedi's and Force users as playable characters in Battlefront 3. Um, and you know what? It's kind of banking off that. Maybe even make a live action, film or TV show based on the Battlefront game. I think you could tell maybe you could tell like a Band of Brothers kind of story off of Battlefront. I mean, I think that'd be interesting to see. And I mean, and we all know that the people fighting these wars. You would argue, yes, yes. For example, Skywalkers, Force users, and that kind of stuff are having it hard, sure. But people who are really suffering, it's these frontline soldiers, right? It's the real people that are fighting these wars without these unique special powers, right? So yeah, it'd be very interesting to kind of see. I definitely would be interested to see like a Battlefront, Band of Brothers kind of thing um, in the future. That would be cool to me. I definitely would be on board for that.
As we were talking, I already thought of a way they could do it and bring it to us sooner. Just because I do think these movies are I do think they're going to time it to a movie, but I think these movies are just like so far out. And I think instead, what they could do is not necessarily make a direct sequel for Battlefront 3, but do a Star Wars Battlefront Legends. And
Mm.
from there, the types of wars you can introduce are all these other things that are in Legends storylines, and it's not in canon. But it gives you like a totally different layout to things, different arenas, different types of character models, weapons. Right? You could easily do the Old Republic versus the ancient Mandalorians, right? Or the Sith Empire versus the new Jedi Order at the time. I think that would just be so interesting to have. And one, you could then springboard that into these like TV series or even movie series, right? But that Band of Brothers like thing, and you can get away because I think the issue with trying to do something like that for that right now is we really only have like the stormtroopers um, and the Rebel Alliance, which that's fine. But like I said, really played out. And then you have the Galactic Republic and the Separatist Order, which the issue there is you have a lot of clones, right? And then it just becomes like this CGI mess, um, or like it's heavily reliant on a singular actor to play various different versions of themselves. But if you set it in a different era with a different war, you have more wiggle room there to expand and build upon this world and create something fresh.
I think the common thing we're all saying is as much as the criticisms we have about Star Wars, Star Wars is undoubtedly in a iconic story. It's an iconic image. It's an iconic brand, iconic franchise. I mean, the characters are gonna, you know, I mean, if in the like thousands of years in the future, when we're extinct and we have like maybe aliens coming to Earth and they look at our like history, they're gonna think, oh my god, we praise these people with lightsabers, right? And it's Star Wars is just that big, and we are as much as the criticisms I can hear we all have, and what we want to see, and what we want to see, we just want to see a better version of Star Wars. That's one consistent, and one that does is willing to take risk and to change it up, make different, not be so safe, and also to just tell a different story, because we know there are different stories out there, right? I think I I would have to say that there is probably from Disney corporate, that there is trying to appeal to the mass market, too much to a fault. I think maybe there is a bit of a misjudgment as to think that the mass market is a bit dumb, and that we don't like we don't like a different version of Star Wars. Star Wars has to be kind of like somewhat kiddie, and has to have lightsabers all the time. I think other shows like Rogue One and or are examples of what Star Wars can be when executed right. That doesn't involve lightsabers, right? And Star Wars that is very important. I as much as the criticism I personally have about Star Wars, even though I'm not a super hardcore fan, but I consider most like above average, casual, somewhat casual, somewhat hardcore fan. I definitely know that even if, say, they made a terribly bad Star Wars game or TV or film, I'm still gonna watch it. I'm still gonna see it. I'm still gonna spend my time in it because it's more of Star Wars. Whether it's good or bad, I'm still going to take it in. I'll have my criticism, sure, if it is that bad, but I'll still see it because I do want more of it. I would arguably still rather see more Star Wars than not. But of course, we want to see it be better. And I think a lot of people who are watching Star Wars today, are of a older mindset. I mean, yes, we want to introduce Star Wars to a generation that's younger than us. To kids, or there are in their single digit ages, to teens. Um, but there are a lot of people who watch Star Wars that are not that don't necessarily need to have all the kiddie stuff all the time. That do want to see stories that are maybe more relatable to the world we see today. But just in space, um, or I mean, there was even a book when the sequel trilogy came out. There was even a romantic love story book about two characters. I forget the names. It was called Star Wars Lost Stars, I believe. It's like a young adult novel, and it was like a full blown romance. It was like a Twilight ish thing, right? That kind of theme where it's like one guy goes off to join the rebels. The girl, she becomes like this like top notch like Star Destroyer commander or something like that, and they have like this really complicated history between each other, and it was pretty good. If they made that into a TV series, I would definitely watch that. Right? It was pretty good. Had a lot of action for a kind of like a young adult kind of romance kind of thing about it too. But it was cool, and it also tied in. It also moved the story forward too for Star Wars. So they can do better. I want to do better, and I'm definitely hopeful that they will. You know, yeah. Start Disneyland. I mean, I was there not too long ago. If there is anything to to prove that Star Wars has lasting power, it's just go Disneyland. Just go to Galaxy Edge area in Disneyland, and man, it just feels authentic. The rides are amazing. The props are amazing. You just really feel it. When you hold a lightsaber, like a legit lightsaber made high quality lightsaber from Disney at Disneyland, it just feels like the real thing. So I mean, so fun, so fun. I'm hopeful for a great future for Star Wars.
The hell are you reading?
I saw when Chris said that. Raymond had this look. I was like, what is he gonna say?
I was
Yeah,
gonna like get
I
sipped up
already,
by.
I already sensed it. I wasn't looking at your face right now, but I could already sense those things bubbling, yeah, in your head. A lot of variety, a lot of variety.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Okay. Well, Raymond, do you have any closing thoughts on just like Star Wars in general?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm a super casual, but like the world of Star Wars, like the characters, like even the vehicles and everything, like they have so much potential for like doing RTS. I mean, they had a RTS way back in the day, which was really fun. You know, they could do MMOs. I mean, they could even. I remember they used to have that fighting game. Like, I don't know. They have so much potential in that universe. But I guess maybe it's just so hard to get permission from Disney to, you know, maybe they have so much censorship. I don't know. But it seems wasted. They could do like a, yeah, new RTS, like a new pod racing.
Mm,
You know, they just did the Jedi Power battles. I guess it's a remaster,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so.
kind of,
Remaster,
yeah,
reboot,
slash,
remaster.
yeah.
something.
I mean, if they could somehow remake that, I mean, that would be pretty sweet. So,
Mm.
and Battlefront, and like Chris, if you wanted a more challenging, maybe they could do something with Republic Commandos,
Mm.
kind of like a hardcore FPS.
Mm.
But I don't know how they would work with laser guns though. But
Yeah, it could even be like a Call of Duty. Like I could see like a Call of Duty esque type of feel for a Star Wars kind of like for FPS. Like I can see that. I can definitely see that. Like explosion everywhere, lasers, that kind of stuff. I can definitely see that. So would be interesting to see that.
I think VR they have some pretty cool stuff.
Mm.
Yeah. But yeah, seems wasted potential. I mean, if they want to bring out Star Wars Outlaws, if they want to lose money, then it's up to them. Dude, seriously, if they remastered Star Wars Empire at War, and if they did like a season pass, you know, I think that would be a hit. I don't know if you guys played Empire at War, but
I've
No,
heard about it. But I
I've
haven't
just
played
heard
it.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Could you imagine RTS? You can summon, you know, Star Destroyers, you know, like fleets of TIE fighters. I mean,
Mm.
could be like, they could do like a total war kind of grand battle
It's true.
with Star
That's
Wars.
true.
Like, yeah.
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 It just, to me, it just seems so easy. I don't know. That would be like a, would be a first day buy for me. But I don't know.
Yeah, I can
Plus,
see that. I mean, like,
did it, like they had, is Star Wars Eclipse canceled already?
I don't think
Oh, I don't
so.
know.
I think it's still going right. I haven't
That's the one
heard
with
anything like it.
That's the one, I guess it would be more like, because the guys that made, they made like Heavy Rain and stuff.
Mm.
mm,
So it would have been more that story storytelling. I don't know.
Yeah.
But to me, I like watching those games like Detroit Become
yeah,
Human.
yeah.
I don't know. They have a lot of hits, potential hits. But and then Old Republic is still TBD.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's probably. I mean, I'm sure it's a combination of like the whole like getting the permission from Disney. Like for example, you had Kingdom Hearts, right? You not for example, Kingdom Hearts. For those of you are aware, Disney Kingdom Hearts is kind of a mixture of Square Enix characters, Final Fantasy characters with Disney, and not to talk about Kingdom Hearts too much, but the one I'm trying to say is you could tell that Kingdom Hearts as a game was getting a bit bogged down or held back as it went along by the Disney IP that was in that game gradually, right? So, so getting back to Star Wars, I suspect that could be one of the problems where you have game developers, creative people who want to build a game with a certain vision within the Star Wars universe, but they probably are held back by making sure they do not cross certain lines, whatever that may be, right? Um, um, and then and I mean, to me, for example, I think that's a big part of it. Like from Battlefield, Battlefront, when Dice made the game, we all know Dice can make a game where everything blows up, right? Buildings blow up, but they didn't have that in Battlefront, right? Even though we know they could make it, right? Um, and but yeah. So I hope they do. I'd be actually personally very interested to see that game that you mentioned, where it's like a total war kind of thing. Because I mean, like a galactic war, right? And who wouldn't want to play that, right? That's pretty awesome. Um, that'd be interesting to see. I have a feeling I am hopeful for more Star Wars games. I would play it, but I personally would expect to be a bit of like a slow process, getting the whole like probably pre-approval from Disney saying, okay, we want to build this game. Are you in it or not?
I mean, hopefully they're willing to test the waters and allow for these different approaches to gaming, to their television series and movie series. But I mean, ultimately, I do think they're still a little lost with the direction that they want to take Star Wars. And I think once they can figure that out, it becomes a little more clear with what they can sign off on or can't sign off on, right? In terms of like expanding the world, or I mean, even with the RTS example that you brought up, Raymond, like they don't even need to expand anything, right? You can just have this as like this is what's happening on the war front during the galactic Republic versus Separatists, or the Empire versus Rebels, right? And this is just like a standalone fight that's happening,
Yeah.
and it's not going to cross any lines. It's not really going to introduce any new elements. It could just be fun game mechanics. That's it.
Yeah.
So, but I think for me, it's there's just so much that could be done with this IP. Like we've said already, right? And as frustrated as I am with Star Wars, I still do deeply love this IP, and just seeing what it could be, right? On all of these fronts: books, comics, films, TV, and games, right? Like I deeply love the KOTOR games. I play them on a fairly regular basis. I actually just played it like last year, for like my seventh or eighth time. It's and I want them to be able to bring back some of these games, or to try to experiment, right, and test the waters on different types of games out there. I mean, just in us talking, right? Like I was able to think of a cool Battlefront game that could happen. That still also doesn't like really break anything, because you can just pre-establish it as like this is all legends, right? And it's not going to be canon, and that's fine. But yeah, sorry, I'm starting to ramble now, but ultimately, I know Star Wars could be better. I want it to be better, and I just hope that we can get to better sooner rather than later. In any case, we're a little long in the tooth, so I'll go ahead and close us out. But for anyone who's watching, thank you for your time. If you folks can like, comment, and subscribe, that'd be great. But until next time, bye.